currently Egypt is attempting to interfere in the affairs of Somalia. It has even been sending weapons to the government of Somalia and with the objective of peacekeeping. Does this move being witnessed by the government of Egypt any relationship with its previous destructive activities regarding Ethiopia and the Kurd?
Ethiopia provides a top priority to its peaceful, mutually beneficial relations with neighboring countries. Despite this noble foreign policy objective, the Egyptian authorities has always resorted to the policy of containment. And the recent propaganda on the earthquake that occurred in Ethiopia is part of the propaganda system that is geared towards trying to isolate Ethiopia from the rest of the countries of the Horn of Africa. It must be stressed that Ethiopia was a pioneering country in keeping peace in Somalia. Thousands and thousands of Ethiopian sons and daughters have shed their flesh and blood to provide peace for the people of Somalia. Ethiopia played a very important role in re-establishing the federal government of Somalia, and had it not been for Ethiopia's sole effort in organizing peaceful transition of government in Somalia, Somalia could have ended up fragmented and balkanized into different principalities and smaller states. So, discrediting Ethiopia's quest for peace in Somalia is totally against the interest of the people of Somalia. And of course, the Egyptian authorities tried to use this opportunity, and for the first time in the history of the Egyptian government, they offered to provide a peacekeeping force for Somalia. The question is, where have they been all these years when Somalia was in turmoil? This indicates that the Egyptian authorities attempted to deploy their forces to Somalia not because they are concerned about the peaceful development and unity of Somalia, but for their sheer strategic interest of attempting to dominate, control the route of the Red Sea, peaceful transition of trade, and established their own monopoly and mini-monopoly on the Horn of Africa. They inherited this from their former colonial and neo-colonial masters who were trying to control the source of the Nile for their own benefits. The path that the Egyptian authorities are taking now is only adding more fire to a prairie fire that has been going on for ages. It must be stressed that the Horn of Africa has remained a bone of contention among the bigger powers, and therefore it is very important for the Egyptian authorities to depart from their former colonial mentality of trying to monopolize the transboundary common water resources of the African people for their own benefit. International conditions and international situation clearly justifies the fact that both CFA countries and the riparian countries have all the right to collectively use the waters of the Nile. This is already codified and legalized by international conventions on the use of transboundary rivers. And therefore, I personally hope that the Egyptian authorities would come to their senses and try to come up with more positive ideas in collective thinking for peaceful development of the countries, of the riparian countries, and of course for the security and development of the Horn of African countries through mutual economic, social, and political integration.
Thank you, Solomon. Desta, I want you to elaborate this a little bit regarding the involvement of Egypt in Somalia's political situations, because there are reporters. The reporters disclose that there are people and groups expressing their opposition of Egypt's involvement in Somalia, and experts in the region are also expressing their concern that this kind of situation would destabilize the existing peace and security situation in the Horn of Africa.
Before talking about why and for what reasons Egypt is coming to Somalia, let's talk about Ethiopia first. What is the track record of Ethiopia about Africa and about its African brothers? Nobody knows about the feeling of loneliness than Ethiopia. We were the only ones as the League of Nations advocating for the freedom and liberation of all African countries when they were on oppression and on colonization. And following that, Ethiopia stood in founding the Organization of African Union, which now becomes the African Union. And it's not only for a mere reason that the headquarters of the African Union is in Addis Ababa, because there is no one else that well deserves the headquarters of African Union. No one has ever advocated about Pan-Africanism, about the unity of Africa, about the rightly place and the right positions of Africans as in the international arena. On the other side again, Ethiopia has been contributing hundreds of thousands of peacekeeping troops for decades as a blue helmet brothers for the United Nations. Since the 1915 to the Republic of Korea in the Peninsular War, and even Rwanda, Liberia, Congo, in South Sudan, Sudan. This shows clearly that Ethiopia, not only in Africa, across the world, desires a peaceful world which they dearly pay a sacrifice of their citizens. one. On, on the other hand, again, it's very solid foundation of foreign policy is prioritizing its neighbors. The peace and tranquility of our neighbors is our foundation for the peace and security of Ethiopia. That's why we pay dearly. And not far from today, even, Ethiopia has mediated the peaceful cessation of South Sudan from Sudan. And even it has deployed thousands of its troops for the peace and security of Somalia, which it has paid dearly so much to bring Somalia to what it is now. And this is not only from the very principles of Ethiopia looking and desiring Somalia to be peaceful, but also to even fulfill the requests that are forwarded from the African Union, from IGAD, and the United Nations also. So this shows that Ethiopia seeks the peace and security of Somalia is the peace and security of Ethiopia. So this proves that Ethiopia looks peace not only with neighbors, but also across the globe with its own contribution, not just sitting and aspiring for a peaceful world. So let's look in comparison, where was Egypt while Ethiopia was doing all this? While Libya is in a turmoil, which irks me to say it even, Egypt was nowhere, which is its neighbor. And Sudan is in a conflict, which Ethiopia is trying to resolve the situation through a peaceful negotiation among the two warring parties, where nothing has been seen at Cairo. So Egypt has no other than disrupting the Horn of Africa coming to Somalia, whereas Ethiopia's stand is crystal clear from the very outset that it seeks the peace and security of Somalia. And pertinent stakeholders of the peace and security of the Horn of Africa should play their responsibility, whereas just manipulating some of the situations that are arising at some point in time will not be even as the best interest of the Egyptian people. It might be as the best interest of the Egyptian officials, but it will never be as the best interest of the Egyptian people, that I can say.
To conclude our discussion, let us talk about the importance of cooperation among countries in the Horn of Africa in terms of ensuring peace, development, regional integration. What is your advice to the countries in the Horn of Africa in this regard, Solomon?
It must be stressed that the peoples of the Horn of Africa have common cultural heritage. The exchange of cultures, economic relations, socio-psychological relationship between the peoples of the Horn of Africa sets a good ground for their socio-economic cooperation and development. These countries have common problems, which includes, among others, recurrent drought, different kinds of epidemics, security issues related to arms trafficking, human trafficking, and all other problems that they cannot solve in a single-handed manner. They need to cooperate countries of the Horn need to cooperate in education, in development of technology, transfer of technology, and to share their know-how and their resources to engage in mutual development. Because development in a single country of the Horn of Africa does not equate with the common development of the Horn of Africa. The African Union follows the principle of using African resources for Africans, as well as resolving African problems in the African way. This is a pathway or a strategy through which these countries should come together and develop their resources. Countries of the Horn of Africa are rich in livestock resources, water resources, huge amount of mineral resources, and all other resources that are scarce in different parts of the world. They need to come together to develop this for their mutual benefit of their own people. Otherwise, they will be subjected to exploitation, pillage, and what a long time ago Andre Gunther Frank has said, development of underdevelopment. This is what they would face. So I think the bottom line is the Horn of Africa and the neighboring countries of Africa cannot afford to develop in isolation and cannot engage in mutual destabilization and the triangulation of conflicts, because this is dangerous not only for Africa, but ultimately for the entire world as well. So the only path to peace and security is mutual development, mutual understanding, sharing resources, and facing the future generation and developing the potentials of African youth so that the vision of the African Union will be strategically materialized.
Okay, thank you, Solomon. Do you have anything to add on this, focusing on security cooperation, Desta?
Just a few points, maybe. Well, I think the African heads of states should be aware that this is a very critical time, that everyone from across the globe, the developed countries, are looking something in Africa. We can see multiple summits of Korea Africa Summit, US Africa Summit, Russia Africa Summit. Well, it's time to question, what are they looking in Africa? We have the resources. We have everything. We have the manpower. We have the huge market platform. So we Africans need to look for a platform where we can engage and discuss our things and make sure that we can benefit from it. And with this regard, Ethiopia has been doing all its best, I think, way before the adoption of Agenda 2063. Ethiopia has been building a transboundary of railroad to Djibouti, and its air transport is one of the largest in Africa. And And recently it has already appointed at a ministry level of regional integration. This shows not just a mere aspiration, but practical, tangible terms that Ethiopia is moving forward for a united front of Africa, where we can say our things in one voice, in one position. So I think the Horn of Africa should come to terms and discuss its things and sort it out in a very civilized way, where they can utilize the resources there, as Mr. Solomon has been mentioning some of the things. And we can simply see that in economic or security terms, we are interdependent. So we should share things, and we should at least cooperate on many fronts. And with this regard, I think Ethiopia and its policy are open, very embracing to such kind of situations.
Thank you very much, my colleagues, Salomon Dibaba and Desta Kasai, for your insight, which is very important, not only for Ethiopia, for the Horn of Africa countries, but the whole African continent. And we will discuss on other similar issues another time. Thank you very much for everything.